What do you think is the most prevalent, biggest single problem facing people in America today? Well, you've heard it said that there are two things that are inevitable in life, death and taxes, but today we know there's one more, and it's change. Change is the greatest single issue affecting yours and my life, and will be for the rest of our time on this earth. Let me give you three predictions that come out of Harvard University with regard to change. Prediction number one, in your field, whatever your field is, there will be more change in the coming year than ever before. Number two, there'll be more competition in your field than ever before, and the competition will become more and more determined. And number three, there will be more opportunities in your field than ever before, but the opportunities will be different from the past. You know, the most important single thing that happens in life is the ability to spot trends and to be aware of changes and where the changes are going. In a recent Fortune magazine article on why companies fail, they said one of the major reasons for failure is the failure to anticipate how changes are going to affect their business and to go on doing things the same way. Now here's a rule for you, and I want you to write this down, and I want you to teach your children, and I want you to practice it and keep it as part of your life. It is this: the future belongs to the competent. The future belongs to the competent. The future is not shared by the competent so much, it belongs to the competent.
Well, let's make this point clear. The road in life with the heaviest traffic is not the best road to follow, for it is the road of the 95%. It is the road with no more opportunity, and with 19 times as much competition. Decide to become a professional at your business. You see, we can either compete or create. If we compete with all the other people in our line of work, we must be willing to accept the same rewards. If that's what we want, fine. But if we want to become professionals at what we do, then we must create. And when we begin to do this, there's no limit to that which we can achieve. We hear a lot these days about a word called security. Everyone wants security, but not 1 in 10 can tell you what it is. Most people will tell you that security rests with a job. This is impossible. There is no such thing as a job that represents security. Anyone with a job can lose it for any one of 1,000 reasons at any time. There is only one place on earth you can find security, and if it isn't there, it isn't anywhere. It's inside of a person, never outside. If a man has security inside, where it belongs, his wife and children can feel it when he sits down to eat with them, and they're warmed by it. If a man has security inside where it belongs, you can see it walking down the street, and you can feel it when he enters a room. That's security, and you can't take it away from him. You can take away his money, his home, everything but a wife who's willing to start over, and most of them are, and drop him anywhere in the country. Go back in a year, and he'll be doing just as well as when you found him the first time. You can't keep a good man down, no matter what you do to him. Like cream on milk. You can shake it all day, but just set it down for a while, and it'll bounce right to the top again. This man or this woman has security where it belongs. And do you know where it comes from? It comes from doing what we do for a living surpassingly well. It comes from being a pro in a world of amateurs.
It was Abraham Lincoln who said that the only security a person can ever have is the ability to do a job uncommonly well.
Becoming a pro isn't difficult. It comes from knowing what to do with time. It comes from knowledge, planning, and working. First, knowledge. This means learning everything we can about what we sell, learning everything we can about people, since that's who we sell, and learning everything we can about selling, since that's our profession. What we sell, who we sell, and how to sell. Those 3 subjects would fill a large library, but we can take things one at a time, and by devoting an hour a day to study, we can become outstanding professionals in 5 years or less. And it's the professionals in this business who can write their own tickets, good times or bad. They can live where they choose, and being professionals, work when they choose.
I had dinner with a gentleman named Gary Becker about 2 years ago in Chicago, and he's a Nobel Prize-winning economist. And he wrote an article in the Wall Street Journal, and he said, we don't have an income gap in America today. It's important to understand because the income gap is the big political thing. What we have is a skills gap. He said, it's like in a marketplace. You go into the marketplace or like an auction, and people with really good skills are being bid up. People, I want you, I'll hire you. And people with average skills or mediocre skills are just not really in demand. It's nobody demanding them. And what they find is that people in the bottom 80%, their average income goes up at about 3% a year. It's just pretty much the rate of increase of inflation and cost of living if they're employed, not employed. People in the top 20%, their income goes up between 11 and 25% a year. Now, if your income goes up at 25% a year, you'll double your income every 2 years and 7 months because of compounding. So you'll find that there's people on the what I call the low road who are just basically getting by, and then there's people who are constantly upgrading their knowledge. And sometimes it's only one piece of knowledge that can make all the difference in the world. But with regard to probabilities, we never know what the knowledge is. We never know whether it's going to be this, but I pick it up in a magazine, I came here, I read a book, I listened to a program. So what you have to do is you have to be increasing the amount of knowledge that you're taking in. I use kind of like the Pac-Man model. You're going to chop, chop, chop. You've got to be gobbling information all the time, because you never know which piece of information will be the critical piece. There's that little line from Alice in Wonderland where there's the rabbits going, I'm late. And Alice says, why do you run so much all the time? Why don't you relax? He said, no, you have to run this fast just to stay in place. If you want to get ahead, you have to run twice as fast. And it's the same thing with our life today. Because of the way the world is, we have to run twice as fast just to stay even, or especially or to make any progress.
Imagine that we have a pool of water, and it's filled with fish. And these fish swim around, and they live off the sustenance that's in the water today. All right? But then we have a drought. And the drought comes along, and what happens with the drought was the water level is reduced. So we have less water in the lake than we had before. Now notice what has happened here, is we have the same number of fish, and they're just as hungry as they always were, and they now have to swim in a smaller body of water and get the same amount of sustenance as before. This is very much a picture of our national, regional, international, global economy, is that we have more and more competition because we have more and more fish in a smaller body of water competing for the same level of sustenance. Your job is to become more and more effective competing in a far more competitive environment than has ever existed before. The average person today, because of the speed of change, believe it or not, is making more decisions in a month than their grandparents made in a lifetime. More major life-forming decisions are made in a month, in many cases, than your grandparents made in a lifetime. When your grandparents came out of school, it was just understood. You got some basic training, either college or apprenticeship. You went to work for a large company. You worked for that company for the rest of your life. Today, those days are gone forever. Today, the rate of change is the most powerful single circumstance in our life. And I say that basically the race is on. It's not a matter of whether or not you like the race. It's sort of like a law of gravity. It doesn't matter what you think about it. If you step off a 10-story building, you're going to go splat on the sidewalk, whether you believe in gravity or know about gravity, or whether gravity is particularly convenient for you. Today, the rate of change is not only accelerating, it's getting faster and faster, but it is also discontinuous in that it is breaking up and it's coming from different directions. And people can be going along doing what they're doing for a long period of time, and something will come out of left field and just knock us off the map. So what is your goal? Your goal is to get into the top 10%. Your goal is to be one of the best.
You know, there used to be a story about Willie Sutton, the bank robber, and he was the most wanted in the FBI list. They finally captured him in the Midwest, tried him, convicted him, sent him to jail for life. And the reporters were covering the trial, and they asked him, Mr. Sutton, why do you rob banks? Remember this story? And why did he rob banks? Because that's where the money is, yeah. Now, why do you want to be in the top 10% in your field? Because that's where the money is, yeah. There's no money there's no money in the bottom 80%. The money is in the top 10 or 20%. That's where all the money is. And sometimes people don't realize it, that you're only a very, very small distance away from being in the top 10 or 20% where all the money is. There's a principle called the winning edge principle. And the winning edge principle says that people who succeed have the winning edge, which means sometimes they're just a little tiny bit better, or they're doing things just a little bit different in one particular area, and it leads to an extraordinary difference in results. There's a principle that says that if a horse runs in a horse race and wins by a nose, it wins 10 times the prize money of a horse that comes in second by a nose. Now, does this mean that the horse that came in first by a nose is 10 times faster? Or twice as fast? Or 50% faster? No, it's just a nose faster. People who succeed in life are a nose better. They're a nose ahead of people who don't even appear on the rankings. If you look at the Olympics, the people who win first place will be remembered. The people who win second place will be remembered by a few people. People who win third place will be quickly forgotten, and nobody else will be remembered at all. But it's always the person who wins by a nose. And do you see that competition where somebody won by 0.33 of a second, and that makes him the number one in the world? It's fascinating.
And here's something that's important. Whenever we say this, people say, well, gee, you know, the top people in my field, they're so successful, they're doing so well. Let me tell you.
This idea of being in the top 10% is a major idea, and let me explain it. When I was growing up, I never thought I could be in the top 10% of anything. I failed in school. I did poorly in school. I got fired from jobs. Try getting fired. I used to pump gas in a gas station. I got fired from that because I wasn't good enough. I got fired from washing dishes. Try getting fired from washing dishes. It doesn't do your self-esteem very much good. I've gotten fired from more jobs than you've had. I mean, it never dawned on me that I could be good at anything. And then I learned something that changed my life. I learned that everybody in the top 10% started where? In the bottom 10%. Everybody who's at the top and doing well was once at the bottom and doing poorly. Everybody who's at the front of the buffet line of life was once at the back of the line. Everybody who's at the top of your field was once not in your field at all. And anything that anyone else has done, you can do as well. It's almost like walking. If I said to you, I will pay you $1 million if you will walk from here to KL. Physically walk. Now, it doesn't matter how long you take. You can run if you want. But if you will just walk, you cannot take a ride, you have to walk. Now, if I told you, and you believed me, and the $1 million was there, you double-checked, all right? And you get $1 million from walking from here to downtown. Is there anybody here who could not do that? Okay. Okay. So we could all do it. Is that correct? Now, is there anybody here who is a runner, a jogger, really fit? But the point is that some people who are really fit will get there quickly. Boom, 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 boom. They'll do 25, 35 miles a day. Okay? Some people who are not very fit will do 5 or 10 miles a day. Doesn't really matter. Everybody who keeps walking will get there. Are you with me so far? This is an important metaphor. Everybody who keeps walking toward the top 10% gets there. If you keep learning and practicing and trying and reading and get associated with other people, if you just keep putting one foot in front of the other, you will achieve that level of financial income. There's nothing that can stop you except who? Only you can stop you by stopping. And so therefore you find that people who have no advantages at all, but have one, is they just don't stop. They can be a complete idiot. They can have every disadvantage. They can have limited education. They could come from a terrible country with no opportunities. They could have no family and be survivors of a terrible experience, but they just put one foot in front of the other. They get to the front of the line. They get to the top 10%. You can be in the top 10%. So this is what I learned, which changed my life when I was 24 years old, is that if you make a decision to get into the top 10% and you don't take it back, you will get there. If you'll just do what others have done, you will get there. And it may take a week, it may take a month. Do you know how long it takes to achieve mastery in any profession? It takes 7 years to reach the point where you're in the top 10%. Some people may do it faster, but very seldom. It took year after year of working. Now, that doesn't mean that you're broke for 6 years and 11 months and suddenly you make a lot of money. It's a gradual uphill. But the fact is, to get to the point where you're making the kind of money that you're capable of, it will take 7 years. But the time is going to pass anyway. So you might as well be there at the end of the 7 years. Do you know how many people are still here at the end of 7 years? They haven't made any progress because they never put in the extra effort. They never made the decision. They never went for it. So to make a decision, I'm going to be in the top 10%. And I'm going to do whatever it takes to get there. And you know what? There's nothing to stop you from getting to the top 10%. The only reason people don't get into the top 10% is why? They don't decide to. And if they decide to, they don't get started. And if they get started, they quit. All right, so it's very important. But optimists say, hey, I can be in the top 10%. I can be. And they just never quit. They just keep on going. No matter how much criticism they get, no matter how many problems they have, get fired from their jobs, they have setbacks and difficulties. They just keep walking. Just keep going. They just keep going. And they get there and people say, boy, you're sure lucky. No, you weren't. You make your own luck. You make your own luck by deciding where you're going and getting on the road. Now,
and please appreciate this, because I started so far down, I had to look up to see bottom. Please appreciate this. All you have to do is study what the top 10% of people do and do the same things. All you have to do is continuously learn and practice, and as sure as God made little green apples by putting one step in front of the other, you must get into the top 10%, as long as you set that as your goal. Now, I work with many of the best people in many fields, and here's the turning point. In every case, when a man or a woman goes to the top, it is after they make a decision to go to the top. And if you make that decision, I'll tell you what will happen, is that you'll run into a lot of rough weather. It's going to be hard. It's going to be difficult. You're going to have a lot of disappointments. You're going to fall back several times. In fact, we say that life is a process of 2 steps forward and 1 step back. And every time you feel you've made some progress, for a while, somebody else will make more progress than you. But if you keep at it, you will ultimately get into the top 10%. Knowledge today, according to our statistics, knowledge is doubling every 2 to 3 years. Knowledge is doubling in your field. What does that mean? It means if your knowledge isn't doubling every 2 to 3 years in your field, you're in serious trouble. Do you know what we know? That an engineer who comes out of school today, 5 years later, is becoming obsolete. 10 years later, can be totally replaced by a brand new engineer, because the brand new engineer is learning technology and skills that the engineer who graduated 10 years before simply doesn't have at all. So therefore, if the young engineer is not constantly keeping up with his skills, after 10 years of experience, he can be obsoleted out and replaced by someone with 1 year's worth of experience who's got a fresh education. If in many industries today, if you were to take a sabbatical and go away for a year or two, when you came back, you'd have to start off way, way down the ladder, because most of the knowledge you went away with would be irrelevant when you got back. What does this dictate to you and I? It means that we must be continually taking in new information. We must be continually sharpening and upgrading our skills, or what is happening is the rest of the world will pass around us. And here's the most wonderful thing.
The only thing that sets us apart as human beings is our divine minds. Everything that means anything to us, our love of our families, our faith, our dreams, our talents and abilities, our religion, everything we know, is connected to us solely through our minds. Our minds represent our hope and our future. Yet, as a rule, it is the last place the average person will turn to for help. Your mind contains riches beyond belief, but you must prospect this rich and largely unexplored continent. And the only way it can be prospected is by systematic study and systematic thinking. Your mind is like a muscle. It will develop only to the extent that you use it, no more. By devoting an hour a day to study, you're building your mind into a powerful and creative servant. If you only do this 5 days a week, it comes to 260 hours a year. That's 1,300 hours in 5 years, or the equivalent of 162 8-hour days devoted to study and research. Believe me, if you'll do this, in 5 years you'll be one of the most accomplished professionals in your field, and you'll have the world on a string. You will virtually be able to write your own ticket. The average man works 8 hours a day, about 50 weeks a year, for 40 years. That's time enough to become great at anything. The time will pass anyway. We might as well reap the rewards.